Hey y'all, I'm Terry,
And I'm Heather.
and this is the More Than Able podcast.
And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about mental health and church and friends.
And how those things are all tied together.
Yeah.
So, if you have listened to any of our podcast, you will kind of have somewhat of an understanding of what we've been walking through in this season, which is something that we just discussed last week. And part of that for us has been transition in our life.
Yeah. It's been a big move, which has affected our church and our friends.
And our mental health.
Yeah.
I think for me, I've never struggled with anxiety or even anxiousness, really. Typically, I've always just been kind of like a roll with the punches kind of guy.
Yeah.
Like-
you're an even kilter personality.
Like,
I'm more like the crazy one.
that's not, I wasn't going to say crazy or not crazy. I was just, my thought was, if something happens, I'm not typically one to try to plan ahead or be prepared for like the what ifs.
You just take it as it comes.
Yeah, and I'm like, we'll figure it out. I don't know how, but we're just going to figure it out. And that's me. And you're
I'm
quite
the
the
complete
opposite.
opposite. Like, I want a plan for everything. Stresses me out if we don't have a plan. Like, even for little things, even for things like if I'm gonna volunteer somewhere,
Yeah.
and I have to go somewhere like to a building to volunteer. I want to know what entrance I have to go into, who I need to meet with when I get
What time
there.
we can be there.
Yeah, what
what
time
we
I need to be
do,
there.
What do we need to wear?
All the details.
Who's going to be there?
Stresses me out to not have the details. I think it stems from a fear of like looking like a big dummy if I walk in somewhere and I don't know what's happening. I don't know.
Maybe.
I think really I've dealt with anxiety for sure my whole adult life. I think I realized going through counseling that I've actually dealt with it to some degree. The majority of my life. Like, there were times as a kid where, like, I remember taking road trips places and thinking, I'm not going to make it back home. I'm going to die in a car crash.
Mm-hmm.
And that was normal to me. But then as an adult going through counseling, I realized, like, oh, that was actually anxiety.
Yeah.
And so, but as an adult, like, I've dealt with it on a very big scale.
Yeah.
Like, there's been literally years of my life where I've just spent the majority of the time living in fear and worry. And like, there was a span of probably about 5 years where driving was extremely difficult. There was a time when I couldn't even drive a mile down the road without having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And, driving still is a bit of an issue for me whenever it comes to like long distances, a lot of highway driving, that sort of thing. But thank God, like, I don't deal with that kind of anxiety just going to and from everyday places like I used to.
Well, and even the highway side of it, I'm like, that's improved drastically
Oh,
over the
for
last
sure.
several years.
Used to, I couldn't
you
even-
couldn't do any highway driving.
I couldn't even get on. Like, I remember as I was trying to work through it, because I knew that the only way to get through it is to just do it.
Yeah.
Didn't mean to rhyme, but it works.
did.
The only way to get through it is to just do it. That should be a slogan.
If
of
I
some
was
sort.
like really keen and fast, I'd have some sort of rapper name for you, but I'm not that kind of person.
But there was a time whenever I was just trying to get through it, and I was like, okay, I've got to just get on the highway and just drive. And I would literally, like, we lived in DFW, and there was just a smaller highway. It was Highway 287. And I would get on, and then the very next exit, I get off. And I would go down to the next exit, and I get on. And then I'd get off at the next exit.
Yeah.
Like, that was literally all I could do, but it was like those little bits of exposure to like try to get myself used to it.
Well,
and then,
and you had like a major panic attack
yeah.
while driving on the highway one year.
Yeah. There was, it was like 2017, and I was on Interstate 20, which is a huge interstate in itself. Like, that's scary to drive on, even if you don't have anxiety. But I don't even know where it came from. But yeah, I had a massive panic attack and had to pull over on the side of the road. My mom was with me. And pulling over the side of the road definitely was not the right thing to do. It made it so much worse because cars are zooming by. And then a cop like came and pulled in front of me and got out and walked back to make sure everything was okay. And I was explaining to him what happened. He's like, well, in my experience, like you just gotta go. You just gotta go with the flow. You gotta get on and just go. And I was like, he doesn't even understand anything that I'm experiencing right now. And I managed to get back on and make it to the next exit and pulled into like a gas station. And I remember going into the bathroom and just looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, you're fine. You're fine. You're not dying. Because that's what it felt like. You know, it was, if anybody has ever experienced a panic attack, like that's kind of what it feels like. It's like you're dying.
You're dying, yeah.
And
I know my very first panic attack, which was probably in 04, maybe 05. And I didn't know what it was. And I felt like I was dying. Like it was the dead of winter and I was like sweating bullets. I was so freaking hot. I couldn't catch my breath. I felt like I was going to pass out. My heart was racing. And it was probably like in the single digits outside. And I went outside because I was that hot. Yeah. I couldn't compose myself. And I had no idea what it was.
It's scary.
It was extremely scary. And, you know, I can look back on what the situation was at the time and realized why I was having the panic attack. But there was nothing I could do about it. Like I literally felt like I had no control over my body.
Yeah. Well, and so the panic attack I had, obviously it was while I was driving on the highway. And if anybody's ever experienced a panic attack, they'll know that once you have a panic attack in one specific place, if you go back to that place, like it elicits those same feelings of panic again. And it's like your brain
it's like
remembers. Yeah, it's like your brain remembers what happened in that location, and it thinks it's in danger.
Yeah.
And so it's like that fight or flight response.
Yeah.
It's I learned through many books and counseling. You have what's called the amygdala, which is like the part of your brain that protects you. So if you're being attacked by a bear, your amygdala kicks in and tells you,
fight!
Yeah, you either got to fight this bear or you got to run. And that is what kicks in whenever you have a panic attack. And then whenever you go back to the same place, you know, wherever it was that you had the panic attack, you put yourself in that same place again, your amygdala remembers and it kicks into gear again and tells you like there's danger.
Yeah.
And so it gives you that panic attack again. And that's what I started experiencing whenever I was driving. And it was, to start, it was like driving anywhere, but for sure I couldn't get on the highway.
Yeah.
And so it took many, many years. I would say it took weeks maybe to get like somewhat okay with just driving like close by the house. But it took years to where I finally could get on the highway and be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so now like I can get on the highway and be okay for a little while. But if I have to go real far, I start feeling those panicky feelings coming back. Yeah. And it's almost a feeling of like being trapped. And I think it comes from like when you're on an interstate, like you can only get off the interstate at certain points. And so my brain is like, you're trapped. You can't go nowhere. Like you just passed an exit. You can't get off until the next exit. And it's that trying to retrain my brain to say like, you're fine. And that's the most frustrating thing too, because it's like, you're fine. Like nothing is wrong with you.
Yeah.
Like why are you freaking out? And
but in that, like even trying to tell yourself that with everything that you're feeling, and
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And this is like you've struggled with it and walked through it for so long. I have an understanding of how it affects you from the outside for me.
Yeah.
But even over the last several months where I have been dealing with that, I have a completely different understanding of what it is and what it looks like and how it feels. And the whole, you're fine, that doesn't work.
No.
Like having the panic attack or the anxiety and just feeling like you want to take yourself out of your body. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I told Heather that I had a day a few weeks ago where I had I don't know if maybe it was a panic attack,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it was a panic attack with anxiety, and it was a
I think
full-fledged.
a panic attack comes from anxiety.
Yeah.
Like, I think the two are very much like intertwined. Like, I've heard you've heard people say stuff about anxiety attack versus panic attack. An anxiety attack, I perceive an anxiety attack as like a long period of like anxious feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've had yeah. So before we moved, I started having really bad anxiety, and I wasn't having panic attacks, which panic attacks I think are more categorized as like a shorter duration, but like a very, very intense.
Mm-hmm.
Like your heart is racing, you're sweating, you're feeling like you're going to pass out. Like it could be any number of things, but it only lasts for a certain amount of time, and then you kind of come down off of it. An anxiety attack is more like longer in duration. Like before we moved, I started having a lot of anxiety, and I dealt with that for several weeks. Like before the move, during the move, after the move, before it started finally getting better. And so that was like an anxiety attack versus a panic attack, where it's like a in the moment, very intense feelings of panic.
Yeah, and that was everything that I felt that Friday, and just the consistent anxiousness, the consistent thoughts, and that led to me feeling like literally screaming, like actually vocally screaming, because I was freaking out. And that's not something that I've like I said, I had a panic attack a long time ago, but it has definitely been more so on the I don't want to say the norm. It's definitely been more consistent since we have moved. I think a huge part of that is because our lives have completely changed.
Yeah.
Like 100% our lives have changed. The only thing that is consistent, or I don't want to say the only thing, the biggest part of our lives over the last several months that have been consistent is me, you, and the kids.
Yeah.
Like that's been the consistency.
Everything else has changed.
Yeah. Our home has changed. Our church has changed. Our environment has changed. Our jobs have changed.
Just the way our days go.
Yes.
Like
Even
I
the
went
timing
from
of our day.
I worked part-time from home, and now I work full-time out of the house. Like that was a huge change. You know, the kids, Hayden was homeschooled the last semester, and now he's going back and he's in public school.
Yeah.
You know, the kids have changed schools, and like nothing looks the same, nothing is the same. Like it's like I feel like our world like got completely flipped upside down.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's part of that, again, like we said, is I think it's tied to church, not just the physical brick and mortar, but the actual what it looks like with your friends.
Yeah, the community aspect.
The aspect,
I mean, so when we lived in Texas, we had a very strong community. For many years, we were life group leaders, and for many years, we hosted our life group as well as led it. So it was in our home, and we led it. We had years where other people hosted, but we led. There was just many years of leadership there, and then we transitioned from that to where we were just attending a life group. And our community definitely changed a lot over the years while we were there. We had some friends that we had for a while, and those friendships kind of fell apart, and that's a whole other story in its own right. But you know what our community looked like when we left was what we felt like was a very strong, solid community. We were very connected, and we felt like these friendships were pretty solid.
Well, and it wasn't questionable either. Like I didn't feel like it was ever a question about.
No, it was like this is our family.
Yeah.
Like that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And I can say since we moved, it's completely changed.
Like I want to sit here and beat my head against the microphone because it has.
Yeah.
Like
we've had, our consistent, like what I would say our best friends that have stayed in contact with us, and that's it.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that's a huge part of where the anxiousness, the anxiety, the panic has come from, because there was so much in our life that was just solid.
Yeah.
Like there was no question about what our lives looked like, who was part of our lives, what it looked like on the daily, and all of it's changed.
Yeah.
And
and people that we thought would always be there seems like they're just not anymore.
they haven't been at all.
Yeah.
And
I think we're
again,
realizing more that there's a lot of friendships that we had that were more, and maybe this sounds harsh, but friendships of convenience and proximity. Like because
definitely proximity.
Yeah, like we were there, we were in close proximity, and so it was easy.
Yeah.
Like being friends long distance is not easy.
No, it's not.
Like it takes work,
just
and
like
intentionality.
a long distance relationship when you're trying to date somebody.
Yeah.
Like that's not easy.
No, it takes a lot of work and a lot of intentionality to stay connected. And, we've had that from very, very few people.
I can count on one hand.
I can count on two fingers.
I was going to say.
I can count on two
fingers.
Like, I'm just going to be like completely open and honest here.
We're
like,
transparent. We're just going to say it. Yeah.
I can count on two fingers, and it's really just disappointing.
I can count two people, and I can see. And here's the biggest difference is not only can I count those two people, but I can see their face and hear their voice.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge difference between the ones that haven't reached out or haven't been there, or even like there was a lot of them in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of the things that me and Heather have talked a lot about is as much as our lives have changed, like theirs didn't.
Yeah, their daily life hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to really put fault on them, because if like there were probably very few people that we were a part, like a really big part of their daily life.
Yeah.
It was more like a weekly thing.
Yeah.
And so if their daily life didn't change, like the only thing that changed is like they don't see us now, like if we were going to hang out on a Friday or a Saturday, they don't see us at church. Like that's the only thing that's changed for them. Whereas for us, it's like everything has changed.
Yeah. So that was about 18 minutes of anxiety, church, friends. Our life has changed. These are the things we've struggled with anxiety. These are the places we've struggled with church. These are the things where we've struggled with in friendship. So on the flip side of that, what do we do? How do we address these? Because I don't want it just to be like, oh crap, oh poor me, poor us. This is so hard. What are the things that we've tried to change or to shift or to? I can picture like two gears trying to interlock, but they're just grinding on each other. So what do we do to change that? So where those things are, what's the word I want? Molding. That's not the right word, but like where those gears are cogging together where they're supposed to. So like for you, when it comes to the anxiety, like what are some of the biggest things that you've had to do that's made those improvements for you?
Well, one thing, which maybe is not a popular opinion, is I take medication every day. That's something that I used to be super against. I didn't want to take medication. I felt very against it. I've tried so many medications.
You've tried a lot of medications and made it worse.
And it just always made the anxiety worse. And really it took a doctor that understood, like, okay, you've tried all these medications and they were in this class of medication. So that class of medication is now off limits. We don't even touch that. Yeah. We need to go to a different class of medications. And like I had gone to doctors before that it's like, oh, okay, well that medicine didn't work for you. Let's try this one. But it's in the same class of medication. And it was the same thing. Like I'd take it for a week and then my anxiety would get way worse. Mm-hmm. And so a doctor I had in Texas, he was a super great doctor. He prescribed me a different class of medication, and I've been taking it every day since then, and it's made a world of difference.
Well, and didn't he gave you two different kinds of medication, one for a daily, and one in those moments where you feel like you're having that complete like overcoming panic.
Yeah. So he prescribed me lorazepam, which is it's a benzo. It's a controlled substance. It's one of those things that some doctors get a little iffy about prescribing because it is a controlled substance. But it's like a super low dose that he gave me, and like one super low dose pill is enough for me to like calm those feelings of anxiety. And I think there was one time after we moved that I had to take 2 of them because it was like, I think it was Christmas Day, and we had people coming over, and some people that said they weren't coming, now they are coming, and
A lot of people.
Yeah, I was like, are we gonna have enough food? Like, I was freaking out about it.
Food.
I remember sitting in here in the closet, like I was crying and I was freaking out, and so I had to take more medicine that day. And I'm like, I finally am to a place where I'm like, you know what? That's okay. Like, if that's what I need, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've only taken it a handful of times since we've moved. Like, I try not to take it unless I absolutely need it.
Yeah.
And then I have my daily medication that I take.
Well,
and
something
okay.
I think about is, I've heard a lot of people say, well, you just need to keep praying about it. You need to keep praying about it. God's going to remove it. God's going to take care of it. Well, guess what? God gave us doctors.
Yeah.
God gave us people that were smart enough to use medicine that pharmacists and scientists
I don't know.
that God gave us scientists, to use those type of things to help our body.
Yeah.
And so,
because I think sometimes it can be like, there have been times where I've been in a moment and I've prayed. Like, I remember a very specific time when we lived in Texas. It was a long time ago, and I was driving and starting to have immense panic, and I literally started screaming at the devil. And I was like, you don't have any authority in my body. You have to get out right now. Like, it was intense, but it worked in that moment.
yeah.
And so, like, there is power in that.
Absolutely.
And, I 100% believe that, like, you should pray and that God can remove it from you. But I also think there, too, are things in your body that just go wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, think of, like, there's so many, like, diseases in our bodies that we have to take medication for.
Yep.
And some people look at mental health as something that's like, you just have to pray away.
Or just get over it. Like, everybody deals with crap. Just deal with it.
Yeah. Like, it's something that, like, isn't seen to, like, the naked eye. It's something that's internal. But I think about so many diseases that are internal that
you can't see. Yeah.
But there are still medications to treat those, and mental health is no different.
I think that there's
disease.
a negative stigmatism against those things.
For sure.
Because it's definitely something that's been more in the public eye, been more spoken about in the last 20 years.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just more prevalent, like with social media and all the things, like it's more prevalent in our young kids.
Way more prevalent.
Like, it's something that is, it runs rampant, and yet there's still a stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
That's like, especially, I feel like there's especially a stigma attached to it if you're a Christian and you deal with anxiety or depression.
Yeah, like you shouldn't have real life situations or real life problems with your body because you're a Christian. Well, guess what? I'm a human being just like any other human being.
Yeah.
Just because I believe in a God who sent his only son to die on a cross for my sins, who will one day return and take us to glory, doesn't mean that I'm any different than anybody else on this earth.
Well, and anxiety and depression, like, they're no different than anything else that goes wrong in your body. Like, anything, like, the only difference is, like, there's maybe not a blood test that can say, well, you have this disease. But I know I had to take a test at my doctor's office, but it was like a questionnaire test.
Yeah.
And he diagnosed me with general anxiety disorder, and ADHD. Which I don't take anything for ADHD. I tried and it didn't help. And so, I just deal with that. It's, for me, not for a lot of people, but for me, it just means I can't focus as well. And I have to try a little harder to focus on the things that I need to focus on.
Well, and it's the same thing with PTSD. That's something that has definitely been spoken about since the early 2000s. And it, at least from my viewpoint, it seemed like it was very much tied to anybody that was in the military, had been in the military.
Yeah.
And so it seemed like the stigmatism that was tied to that was, well, you had to have been in the military for this. But PTSD is a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And I've been to a counselor that has told me that's what you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been in the military. I've never gone to war. But there is things in my life that has caused that.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody deals with stress. And some people deal with it differently. But for me, that was something that, again, kind of like, a counselor is a form of doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something I was diagnosed with.
Well, and trauma looks different. Like, I think people think of trauma as like you had to have seen something gory. Like in the military, you see people die, you're at war. That's trauma.
Yeah.
But your brain doesn't work that way. Your brain doesn't say, well, this is trauma and that's not trauma. Like, your brain can't differentiate something that you had seen that was super gory from maybe your parents were divorced as kids, or with us, like, there was infidelity. That was trauma in my brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, maybe you went through a divorce.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things that your brain recognizes as trauma that, society is going to be like, whatever, that ain't trauma. You want to hear trauma?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my trauma.
Yeah.
Like, somehow, like, we're in this competition with each other that, like, my trauma is worse than yours.
Yeah.
But, like, your brain doesn't discriminate one trauma from the other.
Not even a little bit.
And so, my trauma, maybe I didn't experience, witnessing somebody murdered, but my brain doesn't understand that what I experienced wasn't that.
It was a
still
traumatic,
a trauma.
Yeah, it was a very traumatic situation, and it was a trauma, and it triggered stress and anxiety and depression, and all those things are tied to PTSD. Okay, so obviously, see a doctor. If that doctor doesn't work, see another doctor.
I've been to so many doctors that I would never go to again. Like, it takes some effort trying to find the right doctor
and medication,
one that will listen to you, that doesn't dismiss you.
Oh, well, or just say, here, just take this.
One that will listen to you. And if you don't want to take medication, a doctor who will give you alternative options. Like, you have to do some work to try to find a good doctor.
Because you got to think about how difficult it is to navigate and how vast the issue can be. So don't just say, well, this doctor said this was going to work and it didn't work, so that's not a solution. Try multiple doctors, try different medications, try different forms of, I don't want to say meditation, but like giving yourself time to relax, to focus on something that's calming, whether that's prayer or reading your Bible,
journaling,
or just say journaling, whether that's Bible journaling or just regular journaling. If that means writing down what you dealt with, what somebody may have done to you, writing down all the things that you want to say to that person. We've talked about this before, an undeliverable letter, where somebody has harmed you, or you have negative feelings or negative emotions to somebody, and you have all the things you want to say to them, but you don't want to because you don't want to hurt them, or you can't because they have passed, or whatever the situation may be. But that can still be a very
therapeutic.
Thank you. A very therapeutic thing to get those things off of your heart and your mind.
That was something that my counselor, so that's not something we just made up. That's something that my counselor actually had me do whenever I was going through counseling the last time, just trying to work out all of the emotional hurt and stuff from, the infidelity that we experienced in our marriage. And so there was a lot of still like anger and hurt feelings that I was having towards Terry. And it's stuff that like I would never want to say to him. Like, I don't want to say hurtful things. But there's still things that were inside of me
Yeah.
and they needed to come out.
Yeah.
And so she told me, she said, write an undeliverable letter. She said, so you're going to write a letter as if you were going to deliver it. She said, you write out all the things that you're feeling, anything that you ever have felt, the anger, the hurt, like all the things that you would want to say to him, but not say to him.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, and then when you're done, you rip it up, you burn it, whatever you need to do. But there's something that happens in our brains whenever we get those thoughts out from our brain. You're doing the physical act of writing them out, and now they're on paper. Like there's something that
You're
happens.
releasing it.
Yeah, there's something that happens in
Mm-hmm.
your brain, and you're getting it out.
Yeah.
And so whether it's that or you're just simply journaling, you're just writing down all of your thoughts. But there is something that physically happens in your brain whenever you're getting out
Well,
and on paper.
And I know for me, there's been times where I've been struggling with whatever the situation might be, and I'm praying with God and I'm talking with God, and so I start writing things down. And there's been times where, actually just a week or so ago, and I wasn't even journaling, but God gave me words, and so I wrote them down. But there's been many times where I have been journaling, and God has given me words, not a word or a psalm or a verse in the Bible, but he has actually spoken something to me, and I wrote it down. And it's a great thing to reflect on. I also think it gives power to it when you, like you said, when you can see it and be able to go back to it.
Yeah.
So those are all good things that you can do. Find somebody, if it's not a counselor, like find a trusted individual in your life that you can talk to, whether that's your spouse, maybe it's a spiritual mentor or leader in your life, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's not a parent, maybe it's a spiritual mom and dad. You know, we've had those in our lives. We have those in our lives now. And the great thing about that is when you have a spiritual mom and dad that have the same foundation in their life as Christ as you do, the only difference is they probably have 30 years on you.
Yeah.
And so
And a little more life experience.
yeah, maybe they've walked through that exact thing. So make sure you have those kind of people in your life. So when it comes to church, and like we've said, we left Texas, and the church that we were part of, we had been there for 8.5 years, which is the longest. Well, it was the longest I had ever been anywhere as far as the church goes. And so to know, like, there was, I don't want to say the routine, but like we knew what our church was. We knew what our church stood for and what they would stand behind and what they would supported. That was where we both felt encouraged, like we should go to counseling, like Christian-based counseling. We had so many people within that church that loved us and supported us. We had spiritual mom and dads. Like Heather said, we had life groups that we were part of, and marriage ministries that we were part of, men's ministry, women's. I mean, any aspect that you can think of that would be part of a church, ours had, and we were part of it.
I feel like there's very few areas in the church that we hadn't been involved in at some point
very
in time.
Very few.
And so coming from that to where we were here and we didn't have that anymore, like that was important for us to find.
Yeah.
And that was hard. We went to a church for a few weeks and we just didn't feel like that was where God wanted us. There was, nothing against that church.
No,
like, I think that's probably a great church.
Well, and the pastors were great. Like, we had lunch with them. They were amazing people.
Yeah.
And we had amazing conversation with them. They were wonderful people. They seemed like very solid people. But that just wasn't where God wanted us.
Yeah. And so the church that we're at now, we're at Discover Church here in Pea Ridge. And, for me, it took a while for us to know, like, without a doubt, like, okay, this is where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I know the first Sunday that we went there, Like, it was super welcoming. The pastor was there at the door, like, greeting people.
Yeah.
And, like, he was the first face, I think, that we really seen. And he recognized that we were new, and he took us over to, like, their
Yeah.
welcome center and got us plugged in. And, you know, we already knew some people that went to church there, but those weren't the people that greeted us right away.
No.
I mean, we seen those people after we, you know, got in there, but like, God's made it more clear the longer we've gone there, that, like, this is exactly where we're supposed to be.
And that was something I was going to say, because when we found our church in Texas, I think we were there for 2 weeks, and we're like, okay, this is where we're supposed to be. And it was just like, it was so easy. It was the exact opposite here.
Yeah.
Like Heather said, you know, we went somewhere for about 3 weeks, and then we started going to our church that we're going to now. And Sundays for me was the hardest day of the week.
Yeah.
It's still kind of hard to talk about, because what we knew for 8.5 years was no longer what my Sunday looked like.
Yeah.
And what I've come to realize is a lot of what I was putting my faith in was men. Not that I didn't have a strong or solid foundation with God, but a lot of what
you relied on those relationships.
Yes. And probably more so than what I should have. Maybe not in a negative way, but maybe there was ways I was relying on those relationships where I should have been putting that confidence or confirming that or relying on God more, because that has been one of my biggest struggles. One of my biggest struggles is not being able to be around the people that I've been around for the last 8.5 years. And not being part of the church that we were part of for 8.5 years. And so Sunday going into church was just, it was so heavy and just feeling out of place and feeling sad and like not negative, but just not like going to church for us on a Sunday in Texas was like, I couldn't wait. I was so excited. I wanted to be there. I wanted to see my brothers. I wanted to be in worship. I wanted to hear the word. And not that I don't want those things here. I do. And I still enjoy all those things, but it wasn't the same. And I think that was the biggest part of me, why it was so hard to feel like, yes, this is where we're supposed to be, you know, and finding a life group. Like, I didn't do that. Like, I feel like I've always been one that has kind of led when it's come to church or church events or
because I'm always the one that's like, man, I'm just going to sit back here. And you're like, no, we're going to go do this.
Right. Special events. Let's go do this. Well, and I thank God for this. I thank God for you, because you signed us up for life groups in a time where I couldn't. And you signed us up to serve in a time that I couldn't. And as a husband and as a father, I'm supposed to be the spiritual leader of our home. And I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm so thankful that you did that, because we need that. We need that community. We need to not just go to church on a Sunday and, hi, how are you? Okay, have a great week. See you later. Like, we need community in our lives. We need people in our lives that know us, that we know, and to do life. And because I was in such a bad place with not wanting to do that here, it has just made the transition that much harder.
Well, and I think that's why, like, when you're married, you're a team. You know, yes, as a man, like, you should be the spiritual leader of your home. But you're a team, and what a team does is when there's one member of the team that is maybe struggling or feeling a little weak, the other members of the team lift that one up and carry them along. There's maybe a team leader, but sometimes that team leader even gets a little weak, and the other members of the team have to pick it up. And that's what a marriage is. It's a team. And so while typically you would carry that role of being the spiritual leader. There's a time when you're feeling weaker, and I wasn't feeling as weak, and so I did something that I knew would be of benefit to both of us.
Yeah.
And mental health is it can really be something that can break apart a marriage.
Absolutely.
When there's anxiety and depression, especially when you don't talk about it, when there's things that aren't communicated, I think that was something, for us that was really difficult, is you hadn't communicated that to me for a little while, that you were struggling as much as you were. And that put a strain on us.
Yeah, 100%. Because I was trying to just hold myself together, and I wasn't. That was the thing. Like, I was trying to, but I wasn't holding myself together.
Yeah.
And I had this stupid idea in my head and this perception of that I couldn't share with you that I was struggling because it would be detrimental to you. And having thoughts and emotions and feelings and worries that I was carrying and trying to navigate, and instead of coming to you and having you given you the opportunity to be able to help me, to even know what I was going through, I was just trying to carry it all.
Yeah.
And obviously failed.
Well, and I think that is something that, I don't think that that's uncommon. Like, the feelings that you felt like I couldn't handle what you were going through, or wanting to try to keep, just try
keep
to
the
handle
weight
it.
off you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is it's a protective nature, trying to protect my feelings, trying to protect my heart.
Well, and because I know the move's been hard for you too. And so it's like, well, she's struggling. Why are you going to dump your crap on her? And
when really, we're a team, you dump on me, I dump on you, we work through it together. And that's the way it should be. And I think, if there is anything that I wish that somebody could take away from this, it's, if you're married and you're struggling with anything, whether that's anxiety, depression, negative thoughts, intrusive thoughts, any kind of mental health, anything, share it with your spouse. Let them in on it. Communicate with them about how you're feeling. Give them the opportunity to either be there or not be there. It's not on you to, something we learned in counseling quite a while ago is you're not responsible for your spouse's reactions and their feelings. So if I'm struggling with something and I think that he can't handle it, well, it's not my job to be responsible for his feelings and how he's going to react to what I'm dealing with.
Same thing about
that's his responsibility.
It's not my responsibility to make you happy, and vice versa.
Yeah. And I think that goes against what society tries to tell you.
100%. Society tells you marriage is going to make you happy. Marriage is going to fix everything. It's your spouse's responsibility. Yeah, it's your spouse's responsibility to make you happy. It's not.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite. Our joy. Hang on. The number one priority in your life should be your relationship between you and God.
Yeah.
You should find your joy, your peace, your happiness, your strength, all of those things in God, not in your spouse. And then your spouse.
Yeah.
One God, two your spouse. And if your source is God, if your spouse's source is God, you are both trying to get closer to God, then in that you're coming closer to each other.
Yeah.
And that was something that I'm still learning that.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't share all the crap that I was walking through, because
it's like trying to swim upstream. Society and our culture is the stream, and we're constantly trying to go against that stream because everything that society and culture tells us should be normal. What is normal is the complete opposite of what it actually is. And so trying to follow God and do what he tells us to do, it's swimming upstream and it's hard.
Well, and so friends, we're still working on that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people here that we know.
But we don't
But-
have our people yet. Like, we
No,
don't have those people like we had in Texas yet.
No.
But we've only been here 3 months. And I think about all the people that we had in Texas and how long it took to get those people. It was a long time.
I think the hardest part about that for me is we left what took us so long to build and what took us so long to gain. And like I think I've mentioned many times is the almost 10 years that we were in Texas, minus a short period in my life as a child, was the longest I was ever anywhere in my life.
Yeah.
And so leaving what I knew as my life is really hard. We know people here. Heather was born and raised here. I used to live in this area. We have connections here. Our parents live here. Our siblings live here. We do have friends here, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And trying to make connections and relationships here, haven't got it figured out yet.
Yeah.
And I know it's going to take time. And we're just going to keep at it.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is not good. The alternative is not healthy. It's trying to do life alone, and that's
the alternative
not
is just loneliness.
what we need.
Yeah. And I think what makes it extra difficult is because we are coming from having that community. And while, yes, it did take us a very long time to build it in our minds, like, it was just there. Like, we just had it.
Yeah.
And, like, we didn't think about on a daily basis how long it took us to get it. And so now it's like we don't have it and we just want it again. Like, that desire, like, we didn't have that desire for community when we moved to Texas because we had never had it before.
Yeah.
We didn't know what that felt like. And now we do, and our hearts are longing for that. We're longing for those relationships where it's fun and it's easy and, like, the people are just
It's
there for you.
life-giving.
Yeah.
And I think
it's real.
I think for me, at least, I'll definitely be more intentional about the people that I allow into my life.
Yeah.
Not
Because we've
that-
had those that we've allowed in that
Yeah.
have not been great.
And that was been a learning process. But I think also, even now, having those people, there was nothing wrong with their relationship. They weren't bad. We weren't bad. It was a good. But now being here and thinking of those two men that are still part of my life on the regular, compared to the ones that aren't, I think trying to build a relationship here with somebody, that is going to be, those two men are going to be the gauge, the temper that I hold anything new to. Like, here's the level.
Yeah.
Here is the depth. Here is the commitment and what I'm looking for. If that's not what you want, then it's not meant to be.
Well, and I also think that, like, it takes a lot of time to get to that level.
Absolutely.
And I think I look at, my best friend who, like, we've walked through, she moved to North Carolina for 2 years, and, like, our friendship grew over that time. Like, we've done the long distance thing, and so, like, we're doing it again, and it looks different this time than it did last time. But we both know that we want to be in each other's lives, and so we're being very intentional with that. And but it took us a very long time to get to that point. Like, there were years where it felt more like probably more for her, like she was forcing something, because I'm very much a, like, just introverted nature. Like, if you want to hang out, you're going to have to, like, pry me out of my shell to get me to hang out, because
It's like a little
it's not,
crab.
it's not that I don't want to. It's that I've got a lot of baggage. I've got a lot of insecurities.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
It's a good
And
word.
so, maybe this is for somebody here. Like, if there's somebody listening that wants to hang out with me, but you feel like I don't want to hang out with you, that's probably not true. It's probably just because you need to push a little harder.
Push way harder.
Like, you could reach out to my friend Tori, and she would tell you how hard she had to, like, she would invite herself to my house.
Yeah.
Like, she'd be like, hey,
Yeah,
I'm
she
coming
would.
over. And I was like, okay. But I would have never invited her because it just was not in my nature, and it's still not in my nature. And I'm maybe better now than I used to be, but I'm not great. And
You
so
are bitter.
it's just one of those things. Like, I want to have those friends, but it's hard to put in the effort to make
is
those
hard.
friends. And
It's just like
it's really hard as an adult to make friends.
well, and
As a kid, you can just go ride your bike in the neighborhood and
your best
find
friends.
you
Nobody
can find
cares.
a kid to ride your bike with.
It's no different than when we were dating, getting to know each other before we got married. That's the same thing that a friendship is.
You just don't have that like when we met, I was like, hey. Like, you're really cute. Like,
Can I
there's
hold
a
your
different connection that, like, you don't get
It's not
those
just
kind
the
of
emotional,
feelings.
it's also the physical.
Yeah, you don't get those kind of feelings with a friend. And so I think that adds an extra layer of difficulty to, like, trying to cultivate that friendship, because you don't have an ulterior motive of, like, maybe I want to, like, date you longer. Maybe I want to marry you. Maybe I want to have your babies.
Yeah.
Like, there.
And you did.
Okay, I'm getting off topic.
Wow, chicka wow wow. Yeah, no. It
Anyway.
is harder.
Yeah.
But you can have those deep, intimate relationships with friends. I've had them.
Yeah.
I have had them. And I've had relationships with other men that I longed for their hug.
Yeah.
Not in a weird way, because they loved me. And when they gave me that embrace, I felt that love.
Yeah.
And I'll say this. A relationship that I am cultivating and working on right now is one with my father. My earthly father. And that also takes work.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that I have probably talked more to my dad in the last month than I probably did in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for a little 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm working on. And it's
Well,
new. And I know that's something that I want, and I know that's something that he wants. And so that's something I'm working on.
Well, and I think I mentioned this to you before when we've talked about, like, friendships and, like, how those, like, really good, solid friendships are not necessarily going to be, like, you're not always going to have, like, super deep, long conversations with them. It's those daily, like, mundane conversations. Like, you're just, like, this is what I did today. This is what I ate for lunch today. Like,
or just random photos.
Yeah, just random junk.
Like, I'm at the gym. Way to go, man. Keep it up, because I'm not. Sorry, Tyler.
Yeah. Like, it's just being in each other's lives every day. And that's like you were saying with your dad, like, it may be just like these little bits, but like that's what friendship is. That's what, like, being family is. Is it's just being a part of your life.
And that's something.
It's not like something super deep, super spiritual, super like, it's just being a part of your everyday life.
And that's something I'm having to learn.
Yeah.
And I think I'm having to learn it because, like you said, when we had those relationships in Texas, we were actually there.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a learning process.
Yeah.
But, well, something we talked about last week, and if you listened to the entire episode last week, you would know that we had a word. I'm not going to tell you what that word
I
is
think I
because
only heard two people give me that word, and it was your mom and my mom.
no,
Thanks,
your dad.
mamas.
I thought your dad did too.
No.
Oh,
No, maybe it was my dad.
maybe it was your
I don't
dad.
know. It was our parents.
Yeah. Hey,
They're super supportive, and we love them.
Number one fans. So Heather came up with the word last week, and again, I'm not going to say it because if you want to know what it is, you have to go listen to last week. But I'm going to come up with this week's word.
Yeah, so if you listen to the end, all the way to the end of this nearly an hour-long episode.
Make a comment. Tell us what this word is.
What's the word?
Piggy bank.
Piggy bank?
Piggy bank.
That's weird.
2 words, I guess. Maybe it's 1. I don't know.
No,
Guess
that's
you gotta
2
look
words.
at. Okay. Well, there's 2 words then. How about this? Pink piggy bank.
Pink piggy bank.
See? Gotta keep listening. I just changed the word. Pink piggy bank.
This is what happens whenever you don't have notes to go off of for your episode. It's almost an hour long. But that's what happens when you have 2 people that work full time and you don't have time. You just don't have time
Hey,
to
guess
sit
what?
down and make a whole lot of notes.
It's
You
real.
just have a topic and you go with it.
It's real.
It is real.
Small pink piggy bank. See y'all later.
See you next week.